Every revolution begins not with a crowd, not with a protest, not even with a slogan. It begins with silence. The silence of a child sitting alone, wondering why the world points at him and calls him different. The silence of a teenager standing in front of a mirror, questioning whether the reflection staring back is even allowed to exist. And the silence of two young men who one day realize that their voices, though small, though trembling, might just be strong enough to shatter the walls built against them. This is the story of Daniel and Michael. Two boys, two friends, two souls whose journey through rejection, discovery, and courage would not only transform their own lives, but would also spark something greater. A movement of love, of equality, of hope. Daniel was always the quiet one. From childhood, he carried an unspoken weight, the sense that he didn't quite fit into the rigid boxes society had built. While other boys boasted about the girls they liked, Daniel stayed silent, his mind wandering elsewhere, his heart beating to a rhythm he could not yet confess. At night, when the house grew still, he would sit by his window and write in his notebook, words he never dared to say out loud. "Why am I different? Why am I wrong?" He would scribble, tearing out the pages before anyone could ever find them. Michael, on the other hand, was a storm. Loud, confident, bold. The kind of boy who never let the world see his fear, even though it clawed at him inside. He played sports, cracked jokes, laughed louder than anyone else in the room. But behind that laughter was a mask, a desperate attempt to hide the truth he was too afraid to speak. He knew what the whispers meant. He knew the glances in the locker room weren't just glances. He knew long before anyone else said it, he was not the boy society wanted him to be. Their first meeting happened in high school. It wasn't chance, it was recognition, the way one soul recognizes another in a sea of strangers. Daniel noticed Michael first, standing at the edge of the football field, smiling wide but with exhaustion hidden in his eyes. Michael noticed Daniel's silence, the way he walked with his head slightly lowered, as if protecting himself from blows that hadn't yet landed. It started with a small conversation about books, about music, about the world outside their town. But it grew into something more, something both boys didn't yet understand but deeply needed: trust. For the first time, Daniel had someone who didn't laugh when he hesitated. And for the first time, Michael had someone he didn't have to pretend with. But the world around them was not kind. High school hallways can be cruel battlefields. Whispers followed them when they sat together at lunch. Jokes were made when they didn't show interest in girls. One day, a note was taped to Daniel's locker. A single word, scrawled in bold letters: "Freak." He tore it down quickly, stuffing it into his bag. But Michael saw it. That night, as Michael walked Daniel home, he said softly, "Don't let them decide who you are. They don't get that power." That sentence stayed with Daniel. Like a seed planted in the soil of fear, it began to grow into something stronger. As years passed, their friendship deepened. They spent nights dreaming of leaving their town, of living somewhere they wouldn't have to hide. They watched documentaries of movements, civil rights, women's rights, protests that shook nations, and wondered if their voices could one day matter. But courage always demands a price. Michael's father discovered the truth first. He overheard a late-night phone call, words carrying more intimacy than friendship. The house erupted. "Not in my house. Not my son." Those words cut sharper than knives. Michael left that night with nothing but a backpack. For weeks he drifted, park benches, shelters, anywhere the night allowed him to rest. Daniel was the only one who knew where he was. And when Daniel's parents found out he was helping Michael, their silence was just as heavy. They didn't throw him out, but they didn't embrace him either. Together, they became each other's only refuge. They learned to survive not just on food and shelter, but on the strength they gave one another. One evening, sitting on a rooftop of a broken building, Daniel whispered, "Do you ever think it'll change? Do you ever think people will stop hating us?" Michael, staring at the city lights in the distance, answered, "Only if we make them. Change doesn't come from waiting, comes from fighting." That was the night their decision was born. They would not remain silent. Tomorrow was the town's cultural festival, the one day of the year when everyone gathered: families, leaders, schools, churches. A day meant to celebrate identity, tradition, and community. But for years, voices like theirs were erased. Daniel and Michael decided they would take the stage. They had written a speech not just for themselves, but for every hidden soul living in fear. They knew the risk. They knew they could be shouted down, dragged away, even attacked. But they also knew one truth that burned brighter than fear. Silence had never saved them. Only courage could. And so, under the broken streetlight at the edge of town, two young men stood hand in hand, hearts pounding but eyes steady. "Tomorrow," Michael said, trembling but determined, "we make them see us." Daniel nodded, tears glistening. "Tomorrow we make them hear us." The night stretched long, restless and heavy with doubt. But when the sun finally rose, it carried with it something stronger than fear, the spark of revolution. The stage was waiting. The festival began like it always did, with music, laughter, and the illusion of unity. Families strolled through the park, children tugged at balloons, vendors shouted their prices, and the stage shone with performers celebrating tradition. On the surface, it looked like togetherness. But beneath the surface, something vital was missing. Daniel and Michael stood backstage, their hands clammy, their breaths short. The sound of the crowd was like a storm pressing against their chests. They looked at each other, and for a moment, silence returned. Not the silence of fear, but of shared courage. Their turn came unexpectedly. The announcer called for the youth representative. It was supposed to be a safe, predictable speech about family values and heritage. Instead, Daniel and Michael walked forward. The crowd stirred. Murmurs spread. Two young men, holding hands, walking onto a stage that had never welcomed them before. Daniel reached the microphone first. His voice trembled, but every word grew stronger. "For years, we have been told we don't belong. For years, love like ours has been silenced, ridiculed, erased. But today we stand here not to ask for permission, but to claim what has always been ours. Our right to exist, our right to love, our right to live without fear." The audience shifted uneasily. Some clapped softly. Others shook their heads. Whispers turned into jeers. Then Michael's voice cut through like thunder. "You call this a celebration of family, of unity, of community. Then why are we excluded? Why do you fear us? We are your sons. We are your brothers. We are your neighbors. We are not shadows. We are not mistakes. We are human beings. And we will not be silent anymore." The tension snapped. Cheers erupted from some corners. But from others came rage. Shouts of shame echoed. Plastic bottles flew toward the stage. Security rushed in, grabbing at the microphone. Michael held on tight, his voice rising above the chaos. "You can try to silence us, but the truth is louder than hate." And then, everything collapsed into chaos. Police pushed through the crowd, pulling Daniel and Michael from the stage. Daniel screamed as Michael was thrown to the ground, his face striking the pavement. Phones recorded, cameras flashed, their defiance captured forever. By nightfall, their names were everywhere. Social media burned with clips of their speech. News anchors debated whether they were brave or disgraceful. Streets buzzed with arguments. For the first time, no one could ignore them. In the holding cell where they sat bruised and exhausted, Daniel whispered, "We did it. They heard us." Michael, blood on his lip but fire in his eyes, managed a smile. "This is just the beginning." Morning arrived, but the city was far from quiet. Daniel and Michael's speech had spread across social media like wildfire. Some called them heroes, others sinners. Their faces flashed across television screens, while debates raged in alleyways and living rooms alike. The very next day, dozens of young people poured into the streets holding placards high. Some read "Love is love," others shouted "We exist." Daniel and Michael had never imagined that one speech would ignite such a flame inside so many hearts. But with every revolution, hatred rises alongside hope. On one side were the chants of love, on the other, groups of religious and political voices who rallied against them. Police barricades lined the streets, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, stones began to fly. Tear gas canisters exploded. Screams vanished into clouds of smoke. Daniel clutched Michael's hand, pushing forward together, when suddenly a violent shove tore them apart. Michael crashed to the ground. Batons struck, boots stomped, the weight of the mob pressing down. Daniel cried out in desperation, "Stop! He's only speaking the truth." But his voice was drowned in chaos. Moments later, an ambulance siren cut through the night. Michael was lifted, bloodied and broken, rushed into the hospital. Daniel never left his side, his trembling hands gripping hope, tears spilling freely. Outside the emergency ward doors, he leaned against the wall, whispering again and again, "We didn't do wrong. We only told the truth." Hours passed. A doctor emerged, his face grave. "He's alive, but his condition is critical." The news exploded. Michael, the boy who spoke out, now fighting for his life. That moment became a turning point. Those who had been silent could remain silent no longer. Thousands filled the streets. Young and old, men and women, voices united in defiance. Michael's name became a rallying cry. "We are Michael. We will not be silent." From the hospital window, Daniel watched the crowd swelling like a wave. His tears blurred the view, but his heart burned with determination. He realized this struggle was no longer theirs alone. It had become a movement, a revolution no one could stop. The camera moves slowly into Michael's hospital room. Machines beep steadily. Michael lies unconscious, fragile but unbroken. Daniel sits beside him, holding his hand tightly, whispering, "You told me this was only the beginning. And you were right. This revolution has just begun." The screen fades to black, but a final voice echoes, "Silence never saved us. Courage did."